Welcome, farewell fans, and welcome to another interview. And listen, I have been waiting for this interview for I don't know how long. This really speaks to my background. I know a lot of people go through this time and time again when they have to step in front of people and they have to talk, whether they're talking in front of family, whether they're talking at a meeting, whether they're doing a presentation in front of class. It all gets the best of us, which is public speaking. And as easy as it sounds sometimes with the tactics, with looking at the back of the room, picture everybody in their underwear, sometimes it's difficult. So today I have Dr. Alexander here, and he's going to go over some of the ideas, practices, and the difficulty of just public speaking. So Dr. Alexander, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Absolute pleasure.
Now, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I trained as an actor in the UK. I graduated around 2011. I say around, it makes me feel old now. And while I was, alongside my acting, I did coaching and acting and presentation skills. And over the years, I started to notice that loads of people were anxious. And a few years ago, I wanted to explore that a bit more and go, well, why do people get anxious when they're speaking? So I did a master's in psychology. This was all during COVID, so perfect time, lots of studying, not seeing anyone. And after that, I kind of got the academic bug and I went, actually, I really enjoy this. So a friend of mine was doing a performance psychology degree at a university in Wales. And he said they do PhDs here. And I went, okay. Well, I pitched them the idea of, can acting and improvisation help public speaking anxiety? And my supervisor, who became my supervisor, said, yeah, this sounds like a great idea. Let's do this. And fast forward 4 years and thousands of words written, hundreds of papers read, and numerous studies conducted, I came out with a PhD specializing in public speaking anxiety and performing under pressure and helping those people who do experience it, because it's a very common thing. 63% of people fear that public speaking. And if you're socially anxious, it rises to 97%. Yeah. So it's a very wide scale issue. And I thought, well, I have a passion for coaching people. This is an area I find really fascinating as well. So let's dive in deep and let's help people overcome that while having loads of fun as well in a rehearsal room, in a audition room, in a workshop, just having an enjoyable experience that's nowhere near as scary as you think it is.
Right. So, well, let me ask you this: what are some of the before I get to that question, what inspired you to dedicate your career to this? Like, even in your PhD, understanding public speaking anxiety. I mean, when you look at it, for one, I didn't even know that this was a degree. I didn't even know this degree actually existed. But I knew that a lot of people would ask or try to find coaching to help them better themselves in public speaking. Because even when I was a kid or when I was in high school, they had us go to the front, to the podium, and actually, and this probably is dating myself because I don't really think they do this anymore. But we had to write a paper, and then we had to go to the front of the class, and then we had to read our papers. So it was informative papers, it was persuasive papers. It was just the 4 or 5 different types of writing that you would use to actually, persuade an audience or inform an audience, or however the case is. And we had to do that, and we had to do it all the time. Like a whole semester in English class, just speaking to the classroom, and it was nerve-wracking. So at what point did you say, you know what? I think this is something that I can go into, I can make a career out of, and just build. Because I know you were saying that, you had talked and it was like, I want to go into this, but what was like the true inspiration?
So there's a couple of things there. Going back to the PhD, the great thing about a PhD is you can do it in any field you like. So you essentially create your own degree because you become the specialist in it. And it was interesting with my PhD, when I had external supervisors come in to assess me, there was no one in the field that could do it. They had to go, right, well, here's someone who does sports psychology and high performance. That's the closest thing we can have, but there's no one in this field. So that was a really great thing to have, that unique situation. But going back to your other question about what prompted it, I got anxious myself when I was speaking. While I was a trained actor, everyone presumes, oh, you're an actor, you can speak in front of other people. But actually, I did still get a bit nerve wracking. Why am I getting nervous? What's going on? So that was one factor. And then while I was coaching people and trying to figure out what was happening with me, there was such a fulfilling. It was so fulfilling to help someone. I have a student or a past student years ago who was really anxious about speaking. I went, well, let's just try it. Let's try some things out. And it was so rewarding as a coach and individual to see that person stand up on stage and present to their school, to their peers. And even afterwards to go, oh my God, I never thought I could do that. And now I can do that. And it would never have happened. And
Right.
actually, then that then allows them to progress in other areas. They can now speak and go to university and then do the degree they wanted or do the job they wanted because they can speak in front of others. That before would have inhibited them and go, oh, I'm just going to get a normal desk job and be a very low level employee. They go, oh, I can actually achieve that because it's nowhere near as scary as I thought it would be. So a bit personal, a bit selfish, you could even argue. I wanted to find out a bit more about what happened with me. But actually, at the same time, the pure joy that happens by helping someone else achieve what they think they can't achieve to begin with.
So now let me ask you just a little bit. Now, what would you say is the biggest difference between acting and public speaking? Because people are trying to compare the two, as you were saying, people are trying to compare the two and say, hey, since you're an actor, you should be able to public speak. Why would they compare the two to make it seem like they're in the same lane?
So I think a lot of people go, you're an actor, you're used to performing, you're used to being on stage in front of other people. But with actors, you tend to play a part or play a character. It's not you. Whereas when we're public speaking, it tends to be ourselves. We tend to go, this is me. And also, there's nothing to hide behind. There's no costume, there's no set, there's no voice, there's no accent,
Right.
whatever it might be. It is just me. And more often than not, when we're speaking in public, it's more to do with that social situation of, oh, you did a really bad performance. There's now going to be potential ramifications of, we're not going to invite you to the family, barbecue or things like that because you spoke so poorly on that. Weddings are a good example of those situations. But then with acting, you can do a bad acting job and they go, oh, right, it's just acting. It's not him as a person. It's a job. It's an acting. It's like, oh, you're not a good singer. They're not saying you're a bad person. They're saying your singing's bad. But with public speaking, we find it really impossible to separate those two entities, mainly because we're not putting on a voice. We're not doing anything that's not us. And so that's why I think you can be really confident at acting, but hate speaking in public. You can be really confident speaking in public, but really bad at acting because it's kind of like they're two different entities, but sometimes, or if not always, they're gone, yes, you're an actor, you can do this. Which I think is with the PhD, it was interesting because when I gave people acting and improvisation exercises, I chose them that weren't acting. That I wasn't making you be an actor. I was going. Let's enhance your storytelling. Let's enhance your creativity, your adaptability. I'm not making you be a little goblin, and then you're going to be that goblin on stage. Because I think that's when people go, oh no, I don't want to do this, and then their resistance goes skyrocketing through. I think, yeah.
Okay. So I like that you said. I like that you said that. Let me pull something out of there. In like improv. So I went to improv theater, and it's amazing because you have to really be able to think on your feet because there's no script. Not that I know of, but there's no script. There's no anything. So everything is just coming, off of the top of your head, and you got to be quick about it, right? So that's interesting because if you incorporate that with doing public speaking, because sometimes you have to pivot in your public speaking, because you may not be capturing a crowd or anything. So you may have to do something a little different, maybe add a little enthusiasm or, maybe a little bit of a shock in the statement or anything to kind of just bring the crowd alive. Because if somebody go up there and you may have like heard people talk in monotone and it's kind of like this dry drag type of conversation, you just sitting there listening, just like, okay, like, is they gone? Is they gonna say something enthusiastic? Like these are good facts and everything, but it's just so dry, and then it puts you to sleep. So let me ask you this: so, with such a high percentage of people fearing public speaking, why do you think? Why do you think this fear is still so misunderstood or dismissed?
It's a good question. I think it's a complicated answer. Primarily because people don't speak that often, they will have a really bad experience once and they'll go, oh, God, I hated that. And then they'll forget about it until the next time they have to do it. And because it's something they don't like, that increases the likelihood of avoidance behavior. I know people who hate going to the dentist. They will put it off until they have to go to the dentist because they've
Yeah.
got to get a filling. Same thing with public speaking. I've got so many clients that will put it off for a long time. And then it's when they have to do it, that's when it gets all overwhelming. And I think there's a lot of people never take a public speaking class. I know in the UK, I think it's especially poor. There's not opportunities for people to be taught how to speak in public. So they don't get the positive experiences of it. You mentioned that, in American schools, I know they do a lot of show and tell. They do a lot of let's speak to the class. In England, you don't get that anywhere near as much as that. There's no real show and tell. There's not much. And a lot of the time when it does happen in classes, the teacher isn't a coach. They're not an expert. They just go, oh, present to the group. They don't know how to present. They know how to teach to the group. And teaching, I think, can sometimes be slightly different technique because actually there's a bit more interactive. There's more, let's break it down, let's stop, let's do that. But going back to your other point about having to speak on the fly sometimes and adapt and change, the conversation we're having right now is improvised. The conversations you have with friends and family, they're improvised. And with the improv exercises, we're just getting used to practicing under pressure. Like the Q&A you're going to have at maybe the end of your presentation. You can kind of prep for that, but you can't always prep for it. So you're going to have to adapt, change, and improvise. Or a good example I use is when someone's been pitching to a client, they go, well, we can offer you this service for £10,000. And they say, we've only got 5,000. You can either blank and go, oh, I don't know what to do. Or you can adapt and change and go, okay, I hear you. You've only got 5,000. Well, for £5,000, we could offer you this. And it's that ability when the pressure comes, can you remain calm under pressure, which I think is a great thing? Or do you go deer in headlights and panic and go, and I've seen it before where people just panic and I don't know what to say, and they fall to pieces. So I think the great thing about improv is it will help to replicate those high pressure situations and give you loads of practice thinking on the fly, adapting, changing, creativity, and presenting at the same time. So I think it's misunderstood because it's not taught enough. And because it's a fear and anxiety, a lot of people won't do anything about it. They'll just avoid it instead of trying to treat it because they'll go, oh, I can get away with not having to present. I will do a job or I will pawn it off to someone else and go, oh, you do it. You're my assistant or you're my employee. I think you should do this job because they're terrified of it. They don't want to do it. So it still needs more research and more understanding of why is it happening and why do we keep avoiding it? Why can't we confront that dragon and get the gold that is the public speaking joy?
Now, one thing that I kind of want to jump back on is when you said that the difference between teaching and experts. So, and the reason why I want to jump into that is because, from my experience in, the American school system is that when you have teachers, they're teaching a program. They're teaching by the book. So they're not experts in the field, but they can teach any subject. Right? So they're kind of like a jack of all trades of subjects and teaching because they can teach it, but they're not an expert in the field. Now, the same thing with college. Now, the college that I went to, they actually hire experts in the field. And the great thing about that is that they had a better understanding of teaching the subject matter versus a actual teacher, where the teacher is just going to kind of just teach you the stuff that they learn in a book and not really kind of compare it to real life scenarios or situations because they don't have a background experience. So I will say that there are times where I would say that in some cases, teachers is great. And sometimes having an expert that know how to teach is probably better. I had a teacher that taught accounting and kind of lost me all day long with the lingo. But then I had a teacher that was in HR and kind of was giving it everything. So to that point, if you did have somebody that had public speaking skills or did a lot of public speaking, so her just put the hours in, and they're expert in the field, they teach the subject and they can teach the subject matter. You have the best of both worlds. You have a teacher and you have a person with the expert skills. And I think that's where the benefit of coaching comes in, because they're not only are they teaching it, but they're still living the experience to be able to say, okay, well, you know what? I've been through something like that. And it just never stopped. Teachers, sometimes it just stops. Well, it doesn't stop. It's just they keep teaching the same program that they're given. The other part I want to jump into is when, the fear of public speaking and why is it misunderstood from my point of view is that the reason why people push it off, yes, is because they're scared, but it's something that they're choosing not to conquer. And especially when they're in leadership roles, they'll probably put somebody at a lower level under them and say, hey, we worked on this together. You go ahead and present it because, you did majority of the research. I assisted, put it together and everything, but you did the majority of the research. I think the person that can speak to it, the subject matter, can also be the person as best to lead as well, because they know how to research it. They know how to present it. They know how to make it effective. The leadership that can't present to it, I'm not saying that they're not a good leader, but I think they need to be able to step into those ranks as a leader. I think you should always evolve. And public speaking is one of those ways you evolve, because you got to learn, you got to be knowledgeable about what you're presenting. So with that, in your experience, coaching for nearly 2 decades, what do people get wrong about becoming a confident speaker?
I think there's a couple of points on the previous bit and also that bit. So I'll answer the recent one first. I think a lot of people, what they get it wrong about confident speaking is some people say, oh, you shouldn't practice. And so just do it on the fly. You'll be more natural. You'll be more natural. That's how you be a confident speaker. You'll be more natural if you're confident, if you're confident. It's ironically, you go, well, actually, it goes back to that avoidance behavior. I think a lot of people, when they're saying, oh, you need to, like I think you alluded to earlier, oh, just if you want to be confident, just imagine everyone's naked. Imagine all of these things. Imagine they're not there. The issue with that is we can't imagine they're not there. They are there. I can't gouge out my eyes and not have them there. They are there. But there's an interesting psychological concept called attentional control theory. And you'll notice it in all your days' lives. So our attention is focused on something we're doing, but it can be detracted by things that are either attention-rich stimuli. So, for example, we're having a conversation. However, if I had my phone here and it was on, I might be looking at that every so often going, oh, that's distracting me. It's the same thing when we're presenting. Say I'm doing a presentation to you, but you might sit like this looking quite bored. That might distract me from being able to communicate to the audience, because I might think that you're bored. I might think that you hate it. But you might be in a freezing cold room and actually you're really chilly. Or your face might be really dead. And they might go, oh my God, he hates me. But actually, you could have had a big fight with your partner. You might need the toilet. You might just be having some stomach problems. There could be any reason. This is your resting face because you're tired. There's loads of different reasons. So we can't ignore it. We can't pretend they're not there. However, if our attention is so focused on what we're doing, we actually can drown it out. And the good rule here is if anyone's got any kids, if you try and call your kid if they've got a phone, you're like, Alex, and they're on their phone, they're like, sorry, what did you say? Their attention is so focused on that they actually drown out anything else. And that's what we can do when we're presenting. We can be so focused on the goal, the objective, which is to communicate that effective message or to give them some knowledge or provide an update on what we're doing. So drilled on that the worrying stimuli, that the crossed arms, the board, whatever it might be, doesn't even get into our system. Now, the issue here is if you're losing the audience, because I think you spoke earlier, you're monotonous or a thing. So there has to be some adaptability of, Are they? Am I doing it from a, oh God, I'm anxious and I'm thinking the worst,
Right.
or have I got enough retrospection to go, okay, actually, I might be a bit monotonous, or their faces are one of confusion because I've talked so fast that they've
Yeah.
lost what I'm saying. So that's something to think about when we can't ignore them, but we go, can we kind of fine tune what we're doing? But a lot of the time, I think people get wrong about presenting is, oh yeah, it's all about the message. It's all about what you say. It's never about how you say it. Or some people say, no, it's all about how you say it. It's never about the message. And it's a combination, because some people go, oh yeah, it's all about how you say what you're saying, which is true. But actually, that's true from an emotional point of view, that we will interpret things. Is it engaging? Is it going to create something interesting for us to listen to? But if I'm still talking rubbish, then the audience aren't going to like that. So I've got to give value in my content, but also value in how I'm saying it. It's got to be interesting. Like, good morning, everyone. Welcome to my presentation. I'm going to talk to you today. I'm like,
Yep.
falling asleep, very bored. However, if I'm going, hey, everyone, welcome to the presentation. We're losing lots of money. Okay, it's all going downhill. It's energetic. It's interesting. It's not the appropriate thing to express. I always say to clients, smiling is a great thing to talk to your audience. Smiling opens them up, makes them more receptive, but don't smile giving bad news. You're all fired. It's because the audience you've got to think about what's going to be right for the audience.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's a big mistake. People think sort of, focusing on one or the other, when actually it's more of a rounded approach. You've got to work on content and even visuals and your delivery. It's the whole package, and learn from other people as well. That's also really important.
So one thing that I do, and one of the tips that I have is, and I tried that. So I've tried several things with public speaking. Okay. And this is going to lead into my next question. So I tried a few things with public speaking. One, looking at the back of the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
I tried that. Looking at focusing on one person. I tried that. I've tried, picturing people in their underwear. I've tried those techniques. But one proven technique has worked for me time and time again. And I've tried to tell people that had issues with public speaking, or that was going up and speak, especially if they were speaking before me, if it was a line of us that was speaking, and they would say, like, why are you so calm? I'm like, I'm not calm, I'm actually nervous. And I believe that if you're not nervous, something is wrong. Like you should be, and not saying that nervous is a bad thing. Nervous is actually a good thing, because you're conscious of what's going on. You have prepared, and you should be nervous. If you're not nervous, I'm not saying that you have a lot of confidence, but I think if you're too confident, you can mess up, and mess up bad if you're too confident, because I know I got this. I'm nervous every time I have to get on a microphone, get on stage. I'm nervous every time. But then when I get out there and I get to the microphone, my mind is clear. I get comfortable, and I'll be able to have the conversation, or I could present, or I could do whatever. But one of my number one go-tos when I speak is, and everybody normally does it, which is, greet the audience and everything. But my number one is telling a joke. That's always my icebreaker, and that makes me feel comfortable, because now I feel like I have an engaging audience. And it can be as simple as something as one of my number one go-tos is the weather. Just asking people, hey, are y'all enjoying this weather? Like, how's the weather? Like, I've been in the AC all day, or man, it's raining cats and dogs outside, but I forgot my umbrella. You see how soaking wet I am. And people can relate to that. So if you tell a joke or a statement that's relatable and get the audience engaged, then from there, it makes it for an easier conversation.
Yeah, I think that's right. Everyone's going to have a slightly different technique that works for them, and it's with athletes. I always say, if I have 10 athletes, I'm not all going to give them the same strength and conditioning program, because some need to lose weight, some need to gain weight, some need to improve their upper body strength, lower body strength, and there's lots of, I like to call them as, sometimes they're sticking plaster solutions. So they're ways that will help people in the short term to reduce that anxiety so they can get through that performance. And then once that's over, then maybe when they've got a bit longer, they can dive deep and go, well, what's the root cause of that anxiety? So I would say, if we were coaching, I would say, okay, first thing first, we need to identify the specific source or sources of that anxiety. We go, oh, what are we really worried about? Well, I'm worried about making a mistake. Well, why? Well, I'm worried that if I make a mistake, I'll lose the sale. Great. Why is that worrying? Well, if I lose the sale, then I won't be able to afford my rent. Okay. Well, why? And you find that you keep asking, like an annoying 5-year-old, you keep saying why, and you get to the root problem of, that's what I'm worried about. But for those people who do get anxious just before that presentation, there are loads of different techniques you can try. And annoyingly, you've got to find the one that works for you. So people might go, oh, I tried that, doesn't work. Great, fine, doesn't work for you. Try another one. Like you like to make a bit of connection with the audience, which is great. Some people might say, I'm going to do some breathing exercises before I go on. Great. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, things like that. Going back to what you said about the anxiety, you do need an optimal level of anxiety for peak performance. Correct. If you're too mellow, you're not going to have enough energy to have that peak level of performance. If you have too much, then obviously you're going to have, bad, it's going to be bad as well. You have to have that optimal level. But what you alluded to as well was you've got a facilitative version of anxiety, one you think that's actually good for performance, or you've got debilitative, where you think anxiety is bad for performance. So when you think it's good for performance, you approach things more like a challenge. Oh, I'm anxious, but I'm willing to challenge. I'm willing to go forward for it. Whereas if you always think it's a bad thing, as soon as you feel it, you're there going, oh my God, it's bad. And you spiral downhill. But there's a great thing about your body. So when I get excited, my heart rate goes, my hands get shaking. I'm imagining the best case scenario. When I'm getting anxious, my heart rate goes, my hand shakes, and I imagine the best case scenario. So physiologically, anxiety and excitement are pretty much the same response physiologically. It's only mentally when we kick that in. Am I thinking the worst case scenario or the best case scenario? So sometimes you have to go, I'm excited because, give yourself a reason. I'm excited because I get to share my ideas with the audience and it's going to do this. Not, I'm so anxious because I'm going to make a mistake. Then you start to drive down the path of, oh, it's all going to go wrong. Focus on why you're there and why your body's going, oh, I get to do this. And again, there's nothing wrong with having that heightened sense of alertness is a good way of putting it. I'm alert and ready to perform. So it's a complicated one, and one where I think you've got to do a bit of trial and error to go, this works for me, great, I'm going to try that. And sometimes you might find that it works for a bit and then it stops working. So you've got to try and change it up because your body's used to that, and it goes, your body's adaptive. I'm used to calming that down. I want something else now. This is what I'm worried about now. So I think, it's an interesting concept and go, well, what's my way of doing it to get me feeling as confident as possible before I go on?
Now earlier I noticed you had mentioned like practicing. Some people practice in a mirror. Some people practice in front of a camera. Like I'm doing consulting with a client right now on podcasting, and one of their fears is being in front of the camera. And even when I have guests to come on to do our live show, a lot of them say that, well, I don't want to say nothing crazy, or the camera's going to be there and, I'm going to get nervous. And one of the things I tell them is, don't worry about the camera. Because we're on a panel, just treat it as a regular conversation. You're having a conversation with me. I'm having a conversation with you. The camera's not there. I know they're thinking about everybody that's going to see the video, everybody that's going to tune in. They think about all these thousands and thousands of views. And it's like, okay, I understand that's how you feel, but you're just answering questions. I'm not asking you to reveal anything that's going to embarrass you or anything. You're just coming to have a conversation. So that's the first part of it. But when I'm consulting, I'm telling them, when you're in front of the camera, one of the best practices is just to keep having a conversation. Like, well, I'm not getting any engagement from the camera. Because you're searching for that validation. You're searching for that head shake, that agreement. I've noticed people in interviews, when I sit on interview panels, one of the things they want validation that their question is is valid, that it hit home. And I think that's besides the point. I think that's bad when you give a person validation in an interview, because it makes them think that they did good and they actually probably answered the question incorrectly, or they answered the question off. But back to my consultation, because that validation is not there, one thing that I tell them is, like, don't seek the validation, just keep going. The validation is going to come on the back end. It's not on the front end. But to get comfortable in front of that camera, you got to be able to talk to the camera and have that conversation. Like, and for some people, it's the hugest thing. And this is coming from my experience, because when I first started the podcast, I was not on camera. I wasn't comfortable being on camera. I was kind of like, no, I don't want to be on camera. I'm gonna just keep it just analog, and you just got the static image. But video podcast is one of the most watched type of and what's the word I'm looking for? Watch type of mediums that's out there next to analog. Like, analog is so much here, but video is takes the cake. It takes more of it. So when you talk about looking for engagement, when you talk about trying to influence an audience to have a conversation, they're looking for that expression. They're looking for some type of engagement. They're looking for anything. And to be able to sit down and have a conversation in front of the camera, I try to tell my clients, like, listen, you got to get comfortable in front of the camera. I know you may not like how you look on camera, but you have to get past that. Whether you want to practice in a mirror, whether you want to practice in front of the camera with the camera going, you can practice with the camera off, or and just kind of just record yourself. Just put the audio, just run as an audio with the camera in front of you, to just kind of get used to having a camera in front of you, so you can be able to have a conversation. Because it is kind of difficult, because you don't have that engagement, you don't have that validation, because it does get difficult to talk in front of the camera. But one of the things I learned is, if you could just visualize an audience behind the camera, that imagination, because your imagination is really strong. And if you visualize that audience, you visualize them agreeing with the stuff that you're saying, it'll make it actually easier to be in front of the camera and be able to give that monologue and produce and edit that film. Like, okay, I see where I went wrong here. I see where I went wrong there. This is where I could prove that. But you need to be able to have yourself on camera so you can see those mannerisms that you have. So when you're ready to do a full recording or anything, you're good to go. But I do say, if you're going to go on stage and everything, that practicing in the mirror is probably one of the best tools to use. Is there any other tips that can prevent, like, that anxiety, to make it more positive anxiety versus the negative anxiety?
Yeah, there's with practice, there's loads of different ways to practice. So with your very nervous client presenting on camera, I would always recommend there's a term called exposure therapy and a term called habituation, which habituation means that you basically master one step and then you go to the next step. Okay. I use a lot of gym analogies because it's easier. You won't lift 1,000 kilograms straight away. You will lift 5 kilograms, then 10, then 15. You build it up. Same thing can happen with presentations. Let's take an example. So a lot of people don't like presenting online because, again, the lack of engagement. They go, they're not reacting. I find I don't get any response, or there's or the tech goes down. They're more worried about those things. But I would say, okay, first thing to do, let's master saying one word to camera. One word, hello. Great. Can you do that? How was that? Was that easy? Yeah, great. Now let's do 2 words. Now let's do a sentence. Hello, my name is Dr. Alexander McWilliam. Great. We've mastered one sentence. Okay, so that we've done it to one-to-one. What about with 2 people online? Okay, so you can increase the duration, so number of sentences, minutes. You can increase the audience size, so the fact that, we're talking to 1 person, 2, 3, 4. And then we can also increase the complexity. So I'm introducing myself, going, hello, my name is, very simple. But maybe I ramp it up and say, tell me about your day. Great. Okay, this morning I went to the gym. I worked out for an hour. I did this. Great, that's a bit more complicated. Now tell me about the meaning of life and your perspective of it. Okay, bit more complicated. But what you're doing is, think of it like a staircase. You're going upwards for each one for complexity, duration, and audience size. And you can do that various things. So that's what I'd always recommend. You slowly build it up. And it might feel tedious. If it feels tedious, great. You need to keep ramping up that pressure, and you'll find a sweet spot where you go, that's what it is. But I'll go back to what I said earlier and go, well, what are you worried about? Well, I'm worried about looking silly. Well, why? What's the repercussions of that? Well, if I look silly and people see it, they're not going to hire me. Okay. Well, how do we make sure you're not going to look silly? Okay. Well, I need to practice. Right. How do we practice? And you can kind of figure out what they're worried about and then give them tailored exposures. I'm worried about things going wrong. Great. Let's do a podcast where things go wrong. Let's tech goes down, microphone goes all over the place, my camera falls into my lap, things like that. And just get you used to experiencing the things that you're worried about so that when they do come, are you able to, because errors come. I think there's nothing wrong with an error happening, but it's your ability to bounce back from that failure and how quickly that can happen that will determine whether your presentation is a success or a failure. Say my camera falls down and I'm like, oh God, and I spend 10 minutes fumbling about. Or camera falls down, go, hey, Hook, camera went down. These things happen, tech problems, am I right? And then you carry on. That's going to be much more engaging. And also, the audience will forget it. They'll go, oh yeah, you made a mistake. We forgot about that. Whereas it depends if you make a big deal of it. It's like when your slides go wrong, you're like, oh, great. Just keep I'll notice you made a mistake. You don't have to sort of signpost it by going, deer in headlights mode. So practice, exposure, slowly expanding it is always the best way for those more nervous presenters.
See, I like that because just to jump back onto your point of mistakes, there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be hiccups. A lot of people get caught up on, I said so many ums and I said so many likes, the little words in there that kind of damage, that not damage, but kind of takes away from the engagement and the listener. So, and they get caught up on there like, well, I said so many ums, I said so many ahs, like, but that's the learning process. You recognize that you're doing that stuff and you try to grow out of it as much as possible. Sometimes you have to slow down and speaking because you're talking faster than you think. So now you're talking, you're processing and trying to speak, and then you get caught with you get caught with an I, and in some of those instances, and to another point, looking at other speakers. If you look at other speakers and see how they pace themselves, see how they add the strategic pauses in between statements so they can gather themselves before they go ahead and move on to the next subject, and incorporate some of those things into your own speeches and presentations and speaking. And I think that would actually be one of those practicing tools is adapt some of the techniques of other speakers. One of the people that I will look at so far as public speaking is like President Barack Obama. Like he had his speaking ability when it came to giving speeches and everything was just phenomenal. Just the strategic pauses and everything, it was just there. And it was captivating because it just made you want to watch him because it was charismatic at the same time. Right. And I've watched a few other people as well, and it's like, okay, they're pacing themselves. Even the eye contact. The eye contact was phenomenal. Just being able to scan a room and see where their engagement is at. Being able to talk to people directly and have that conversation. Because if you're talking to the audience over here and you deliver a point, and then you talk to the audience over here and you deliver another point, now you get that eye contact and you get that engagement happening with the whole audience. And eye contact is one of the most essential parts, because if you're just looking at the back of the room, then you're not really engaging with it. It looks like you're engaging with the audience, but you're really not engaging, especially if you're dealing with an audience that's where the room is like really, really massive. So you got to be able to scan the room and give eye contact. If there's a second balcony, you want to look up at it. You want to be able to give them that eye contact to show that not only are you engaging with them, but you can also see that they're engaging with you.
Yeah, 100%. I think regarding speakers, it's always great to go, I really enjoy that speaker. I think they're great. And identify what it is. Like you said, the use of pause, the use of pace, the use of volume, the use of variety in tone. I always advocate for clients to go, we're never going to recreate another version of X, Y, and Z because we can't. Right. What we're going to do is enhance your version of presenting. Some people will be much more energetic presenters than others. Some will be very animated with their gestures. Some won't use gestures that much. And there's no universal way to present. I'll say, right, let's just enhance your way. Because there's 10 speakers you might admire. They all present slightly differently and you admire them all still. And that's what we advocate. We go, look, let's make you the best version of yourself. But watching people and watching effective speakers is really important to understand. I can see what it means by using pause there. I can see what it means by using effective visuals. That was really engaging. So I think, finding those people you like and then tuning the area and going, I need to work on that. I need to work on this area to keep moving forwards.
Yeah. I found myself consistently improving even now after, doing public speaking in front of people for, well over 10 years. I still find myself finding things that I'm doing incorrectly, kind of reverting back to some things that I was doing. And then there's some things that I just can't change. But then also you got to look at the audience that you're talking to. What type of audience are you talking to? Are you talking to professionals? Are you just talking to people in the neighborhood? Are you talking to employees? And that kind of makes a determination, because sometimes I stutter sometimes. So I'll say something like 2 or 3 times before I actually get it all the way out. But depending on the venue or the audience I'm talking to, it probably won't matter as much because they probably do the same thing. But when you're talking in front of employees and you're trying to deliver something informative, or you're trying to educate them on something, and you want to make sure that they're capturing all the information, even just opening it up for questions somewhere in the middle, you kind of want to pace yourself. You want to take out some of that stuttering, and you want to have a clear mind when you're having a conversation. So let me ask you this. If someone is listening and is terrified of public speaking, what is the one thing they can do today to begin shifting that fear?
Okay. First thing, grab a piece of paper, get a pen, and you're going to spend 10 minutes, and you're just going to imagine that you've got a presentation to come up, next week. Write down every single thing that you are worried about. Right, even if you think it's silly. I'm worried I'm going to be sick on myself. Okay, great. Write it down. Write down every single thing and then go, okay, in all of my presentation experience, how many have these actually happened to me? How many times have I thrown up during a presentation? Well, that's never thrown up. So why do I think it's going to happen like in 2 weeks' time? Right. And then you might find that there's like 3 or 4 things you go, that's what I'm really, really worried about. I'm really worried about. A common one is my mind going blank. I'm really worried that my mind's going to go blank when I'm speaking. Okay. Well, why does your mind go blank when you're thinking about stuff? Well, generally it's because we don't know the content well enough. Like if you were talking to a client about, podcasting, podcasting in and out, that you could talk about it for hours, maybe even days probably, and you won't forget what you're saying. But if you're talking about something brand new about work related, like statistical analysis in the 4th quarter, you're like, okay, it's very hard for me to kind of off the fly speak about that. Right. But if I can practice it, because again, it goes back to, I often ask people, how much do you practice before a presentation? And they go, I don't tend to practice. And I think the rationale behind it is because every time I practice, I'm reminded that I'm not a good public speaker. And so that makes me feel really bad. And I don't like feeling that bad way. So I avoid it because I don't want to be reminded that I'm not a good speaker. Right. But we've got to get through that. It's like learning a new skill. The first time I went to the gym, I was not good at things. But I pushed through and went, okay, I'm going to try it. I'm going to keep pushing forward. And then I'll be able to do it. So being okay with failure and uncomfortableness, I think, is key. So you've written your big list. You've got 3 or 4 that you go, these are the things I'm really worried about. And then can you make essentially a staircase? So that top thing, I'm worried about performing in front of my boss. That's the main one. I'm really scared about that. Well, what's a 1% version of that? Okay, performing in front of my fiance, still a bit worrying, but I think I can do that. Great. Can you master that? Great. Now in front of my dad. Now in front of my old teacher from school. You can kind of build up that staircase, and it might take time. Yeah. But if you don't have to do it alone. Go to a club where there's public speaking lessons. Go get a coach. Go get support like you would. Again, we treat it like if you were If you were struggling in the gym, you would get a personal trainer. If you were struggling with your nutrition, you would get a nutritionist.
Yeah.
If you had a problem with your plumbing, you would get a plumber. So being okay with going, I'm going to get support because actually it's beyond my area of expertise and I don't have to do it alone. And you can go with them and say, I'm worried about these things. Help me overcome them. They go, great. I go to the personal trainer. I'm worried about a bit of belly fat. Help me lose it. So again, that bit of introspection, looking at yourself, going, here's what I'm worried about. And I'm willing to confront it because there is some gold to get at the end of confronting that dragon. I think that's the key thing.
You know what? I agree with everything that you said. I like the, writing out the list, trying to find, what are the things you're uncomfortable with. Like all of that speaks volumes because public speaking can definitely be terrifying for any and everybody. And that list that you gave, look, Pharaoh fans, take heed to this. If you got to go and you got to do public speaking, this is the list that you need to do. One step at a time, make a staircase out of it, go one bit at a time. So is there any last piece of advice you want to give to the Pharaoh fans, just in general, public speaking, word of advice, anything?
I would say it might feel scary. It might feel overwhelming, but the benefit and the value of overcoming that anxiety and fear related to public speaking will change not only your professional lives, but your personal lives too. And I would highly advocate going for it, jumping in and having some fun in the process as well, because it will be so rewarding at the end. So again, they always say avoidance, it means the problem keeps escalating. So if you confront that dragon, it's not going to grow any bigger. You're going to be able to fight it. You're going to be able to overcome it. But if you leave it too long, it's going to be so gigantic that you're never going to be able, or not never, I'm not going to say never. It's going to be very hard to overcome it. But that's when, if it does get hard, that's when you go for further support. Get the coach, get the friend. Grab a friend. If both of you are anxious about speaking, both of you do it. Go, let's take this class together. We're both going to do it to overcome our nerves. Go to an improv class.
Yeah.
Love using improv to help public speaking.
Good idea. Great idea.
I think those are the things I would advocate. And share your journey. Say, look, I'm scared. I'm willing to confront it. Does anyone else want to share my journey with me? And you'll have so much support because everyone I know goes, I'm glad I'm not speaking because, I hate it. I'm glad my colleague had to do it because I hated that. So I think, keep confronting it because the reward will be so worth it.
I definitely agree. Dr. Thank you for coming on, talking to the Fair World fans. This has been informative and enlightening. I've learned a few more things just about public speaking just from having this conversation. Fair World fans, look, we're going to see y'all on the next go around. Thank you for tuning in. Peace.